G'day gymnastics skill seekers, welcome back to another gymnastics strength and flexibility educational video. This week I want to talk about how to build or how to start building core compression strength. If you're an adult gymnastics skill seeker that wants to improve movements like L-sits, toes to bar, skin to cats, press to handstand, and overall gymnastic skills, then core compression strength is going to be essential. The good news is you're in the right place. Now, last week I posted a video about how to start training pike flexibility. In that video, I spoke about stretching the posterior chain muscles. I also talked about building an understanding and awareness of anterior pelvic tilt, APT, and posterior pelvic tilt, PPT. I shared a number of great exercises that you can use to start training pike flexibility. Now you might be wondering why I'm mentioning this and what pike flexibility has to do with core compression strength. And what I'm going to say is they support each other. If you don't have good pike flexibility, then you're not going to have good core compression strength, okay? So we want to be working on stretching the posterior chain, improving our pike and pancake flexibility so that we can increase our core compression strength. Now I first started training this forward fold flexibility, pikes and pancakes, because I was working towards my goals of press to handstand. I could do one repetition of a press to handstand, but there was no way for me to start linking multiple repetitions or progressing to a stall to press unless I focused on my flexibility training. No amount of strength training was ever going to help me unlock these movements. It's still an ongoing journey, and I'm definitely getting closer to the stall to press, and I'm also getting closer to multiple repetitions of the press to handstand. But I'm still working towards the pike and pancake flexibility goals. Now, let's talk about how core compression strength is going to help us improve our posterior chain length. So whenever we stretch a muscle on one side of a joint, we're actually shortening the muscle on the opposite side of that joint. So let's take the ankle as an example. When I'm stretching the calf muscle, I'm moving the ankle into dorsiflexion. So the calf muscle is lengthening and the tibialis anterior, the shin muscle, is shortening. Now I can hang out passively in that stretch. Or what I could do is I could actively try to contract the tibialis anterior, pulling the ankle into a greater range of dorsiflexion and increasing the stretch on the calf muscle. So this same principle applies with every joint and every muscle that we're stretching. It also applies on a more global level when we're stretching something like the pancake or the pike. So when I'm trying to lengthen the calf, the hamstring, the glutes, the spinal erectors, and the muscles of the posterior chain, I can focus on contracting the tibialis anterior, the quads, the deep hip flexors, and the lower abdominals, which are the muscles of the anterior chain. The more I can shorten the anterior chain, then the greater the stretch will be on the posterior chain. So this shortening of the anterior chain muscles is known as core compression in the world of gymnastic strength and flexibility training. But here's the catch. If you've got a very tight posterior chain, it's going to limit your ability to contract the anterior chain. The muscles of the anterior chain are fighting against the tension that you have in the posterior chain, which is making it a lot harder to close that angle between the torso and the legs or to shorten those muscles. Now we often see this when gymnastic skill seekers are training movements like L-sits, like toes to bar, like skin the cat, where they have to bend their knees to be able to successfully achieve or accomplish something that looks like the movement. The muscles of the posterior chain are tight, and therefore the anterior chain muscles are struggling to achieve the movement with good form, so we cheat the movement by bending the knees. Now, there are some people, let's take yogis as an example, who are very flexible, okay? They spend a lot of time stretching the muscles. So they can easily fold into a pike or into a pancake, but often they have hip pain or lower back pain because they don't have the strength and stability around the hip muscles to support them. So even though they have a high level of flexibility, they lack the core compression strength and the strength of the other muscles to make the movement safe or even to start loading the movement. So we don't just want to stretch stretch the posterior chain to achieve the forward fold flexibility. We also want to be able to strengthen those muscles as well as stretch and strengthen the muscles of the anterior chain. So which comes first, the anterior chain strength or the posterior chain length? Well, it's a trick question because we want to train both at the same time. They work together and they help each other. So we can progressively build them up and use them to support each other in our training. So in the how to start pike flexibility training, I talk about stretching the posterior chain. In today's video, I'm going to talk about strengthening the anterior chain. A lot of core compression tutorials will suggest training seated leg lift variations to build core compression strength. So this is seated pike and pancake, single leg or double leg lifts. Although these are great exercises for building core compression strength, you need to have a certain level of flexibility and core compression strength before you can start training these exercises successfully. If when you train these exercises, you sit on the floor and you need to lean the torso back so you can lift the legs off the floor, you're sort of cheating the movement, but you're not effectively training core compression strength. Remember, the goal with core compression is to close the angle between the torso and the legs. By leaning the torso back, you're actually opening that angle, and it's not effectively training core compression strength. This is why I like to start with standing core compression exercises. They offer us a more accessible range of motion, and they're far more effective at building core compression strength and learning to close the angle between the leg and the torso. Now, in all of the standing core compression variations that I'm about to share with you, the goal is to keep the standing leg straight. We have a tendency to want to bend the knee of the standing leg because this allows us to lean the torso back. It allows us to cheat the movement, but it's not effectively training core compression strength. It's not helping us close that angle. So make sure you progress these movements in the order and you achieve the milestones of each movement before you start working or progressing to the next movement. With that said, let's take a look at the first progression. I like to start with standing hip flexor bent knee liftoffs. With the bent knee, this shortens the lever length, which makes the movement easier. It's much easier to close the angle between the torso and the thigh with a bent knee than it is with a straight leg. Can you get the thigh to touch your belly? And can you hold this position for 30 seconds on each side? If you can, then you're ready for the next progression. If not, then this is where you need to focus your training for now. Once you can hold the thigh to the belly for 30 seconds, we're going to move to the standing hip flexor with leg extension. So the starting position is the same. We pull the thigh to the chest. And now what we're going to do is we're going to extend the leg. So we're going to straighten the leg out in front of us. When the knee is bent, we can lift higher. The lever length is shorter, which means there is less tension or less pressure on the hip flexor muscles. So it helps us to get the height with the leg lift. As we start to straighten the leg, the lever length increases, making the movement harder. Now, this could be a big step up from the bent knee progression. So we like to start with doing reps of this and doing shorter holds. So you might do 5 repetitions where you extend the leg and you hold it straight for 5 seconds. Then you bend the knee and lift the leg again as high as you can. Then we extend the leg again and we hold it for 5 seconds, gradually building up to doing 5 reps with 5-second holds on both legs. Once you can achieve this, then we might do 3 repetitions with a 10-second hold. Then 2 repetitions with a 15-second hold, and then building to the 1 repetition with a 30-second hold. If you can't keep both legs straight in the hold, you may need to regress back to the bent knee variation. If you find the bent knee variation easy, you can hold that for 30 seconds, but you can't yet hold the leg straight in this leg extension one, then what we can do is we can regress this a little bit. So straighten the leg as far as you can, hold for 5 seconds and then bring it back, and slowly over time increase the lever length so you can progress this movement and have both legs straight for the isometric holds. Gradually over time, you'll build the strength and the endurance to accomplish the milestone of holding the leg straight for 30 seconds. Once you've nailed that, you can start training the standing hip flexor liftoffs. Now this movement looks very similar to the leg extension one, But in this movement, we're now going to keep the leg straight. Like I said before, it's much harder for us to lift the straight leg than it is to lift the bent knee. The advantage of the leg extension is we're allowing the hip flexors and abdominals to lift the bent knee and get into a good position before we straighten the leg. Now in this hip flexor lift off, the leg is straight, and the hip flexors and lower abdominals, or the core compression strength, is going to have to work harder to be able to lift the leg to be parallel to the floor or above. Again, we might use the same progression, lifting the leg up and holding it for 5 reps, 5-second holds, then doing 3 reps at 10 seconds, 2 reps at 15, and then being able to lift and hold for 30 seconds. Again, we must keep the standing leg straight and we mustn't lean the torso back. We're aiming to hold parallel or above with this. If this is too hard, then we might have to regress back to the leg extension, or potentially we can start by holding the leg just below parallel and over time building the strength so we can achieve the goal of holding it parallel to the floor. Once you've achieved the milestone of holding the leg straight for 30 seconds at parallel or above, then you're going to be ready to start training the seated leg lift variations. Another great option for building core compression strength is hanging leg raises or hanging L-sits. Again, these work well for beginners because of the accessible range of motion. There is much more range of motion here than in the seated leg lift variations. Now we can hang from a pull-up bar or we can hang from a set of gymnastics rings, and we can start to build our core compression strength by working through a certain number of progressions. We would start with the hanging tuck variation, and we're going to try to close the angle again between the torso and the thighs, so a nice tight tuck position. You want to be able to hold this for 15 to 20 seconds before you progress to something like a single leg straight. When we move to the single leg straight progression, we want to be working to hold 15 to 20 seconds on each side with the leg parallel to the floor or slightly above. Now again, we can progress this by extending the leg a little bit and then over time starting to extend it further and further until we can hold the leg straight. Then from here, we want to progress to the full L-sit. And we can do this in a similar format that we did with the standing core compression exercises. We might do 3 repetitions. So we start in the hanging tuck, we straighten the legs and we hold them in the full L-sit for 5 seconds, and then we bend the knees and we move back to the tuck because that's sort of like a bit of a resting position. Then we straighten the legs again and we do maybe 3 sets of 5-second holds. We might build to 2 repetitions with 10-second holds and then 1 repetition where we're holding 15 to 20 seconds in the full L-sit. This can sometimes be a little more challenging than the standing core compression exercises because we also need good shoulder flexibility and we also need good grip strength to be able to train these hanging L-sit variations. I find combining both the hanging variations and the standing core compression exercises a great way to build core compression strength. If you're training core compression strength twice a week, then you'll do standing variations on one day and hanging variations on another day. Training both on the same day can often be too much volume for beginners, so I wouldn't recommend that. It's also going to be helpful to superset core compression exercises with posterior chain flexibility exercises to speed up your progress. If you're looking for some ideas around that, you're going to want to check out the How to Start Training Pike Flexibility video or blog post. I'll put a link for that in the details below. Remember, you want to lengthen the posterior chain because it's going to help you increase core compression strength. You also want to increase core compression strength because it's going to help you lengthen the posterior chain. They both support each other, so it makes sense to superset them together. My advice is to take it slow. Work on the progression you are up to and superset your core compression strength with your pike flexibility. You'll definitely see the progress. And this is exactly what happened to online student Michael. In the beginning, he could hold a hanging tuck L-sit for 30 seconds. But when he tried to straighten one leg, he lacked both the flexibility and the core compression strength to do so. Over the next 12 weeks, we focused on improving his pike flexibility and his core compression strength. And by the end of those 12 weeks, he could successfully hold a full hanging L-sit for 15 seconds. A lot of what we worked on is covered in this video and the how to start training pike flexibility video. So if you want to work on increasing your core compression strength, I suggest you stick to these progressions and you'll see results just like Michael did. If you're an adult gymnastics skill seeker that wants to build strength, increase flexibility, and unlock gymnastics skills that you never thought possible, you're going to want to sign up to my free weekly email. Every Friday, I share gymnastics, strength, and flexibility training tips and give away a ton of helpful information. I link to videos like this one, and I share details on new strength and flexibility training programs that you can download on the tstmethod.com website. When you're ready to start unlocking new gymnastic skills, just add your email to the email list and you'll receive a ton of valuable information that you can use right away. I'll leave a link in the details below. And that's pretty much it. So if you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Add any comments and questions below. And until next time, happy core compression training.